Once upon a time, there was a beautiful kingdom by the sea. A king and queen lived there in a grand castle with their young prince. But many years passed, and the prince never grew any older. The king invited countless doctors from across the land, but none of them could help. The people of the kingdom constantly mocked the prince and looked at him with hatred and pity. The queen became seriously ill from worrying about him. Before she died, she shared one final wish with the king. She said, "Plant an orchid flower in front of my grave, protect it day and night, and never let anyone steal it." After the queen passed away, she was buried with great honor. The king then summoned all the gardeners in the kingdom who could grow orchids. Each gardener brought many beautiful orchids, but the king couldn't decide which flower should be planted at the queen's grave. Finally, he asked the young prince to choose. The prince closed his eyes and slowly moved his hands across the flowers. At last, he found the most beautiful orchid of them all. Every petal sparkled like a diamond. At that moment, an old woman stepped out from the crowd and said that she was the one who had brought the orchid. After the queen's death, the king's heart had also become filled with disappointment toward his son. He no longer wanted the prince near him. Using the orchid as an excuse, the king ordered the prince and the old woman to guard the queen's grave and the orchid day and night. Suddenly, a dwarf with a long white beard appeared. The dwarf told the prince, "Do you know that this orchid is not really a flower? It's actually a princess." The prince listened carefully as the dwarf began telling the story. Many years ago, a fairy named Helen visited a king. She told him that she loved his little princess very much. With sweet words and clever tricks, Helen convinced the king to let her take the princess on a journey. But she wasn't a good fairy. She became jealous of the young princess's beauty. As soon as they left the kingdom, Helen treated the princess cruelly. In the end, she placed a terrible curse on her and killed her. Then she buried the princess in a garden. Sometime later, a beautiful orchid grew from that exact spot. Every night, the flower would cry and whisper, "Take me to the grave of a mother who has shed as many tears for her child as my mother shed for me." The old woman who cared for the garden overheard the flower's words, so she picked the orchid and brought it to the prince's kingdom. One night, 12 fairies suddenly descended from the sky. They had come to steal the orchid, but the old woman woke up when she heard them. She grabbed a hammer and chased the fairies away. When Helen learned that her friends had failed, she became furious. She didn't want anyone to discover the truth about her evil deeds, so she climbed onto her 7-leg horse and decided to retrieve the flower herself. Suddenly, the orchid transformed into a beautiful and delicate young woman. The moment she became a princess again, 6 colorful butterflies descended from the sky. Together, they formed a magnificent carriage. The butterflies seated the prince and the princess inside and carried them high into the sky. Higher and higher they flew, but Helen refused to give up the chase. Her magical horse breathed flames as it raced through the clouds. Before she could reach them, the butterflies carried the prince and princess behind the sun and hid them there. The moment Helen arrived, all of her powers disappeared. She crashed into the blazing sun and fell all the way back down to the earth. At last, the prince and princess safely arrived in the dwarf's kingdom. When the elder